Hi everyone, my name is Dodds, and I guess I don't need to say that because you know that. So yeah, these are my slides. It's actually VS Code. But this is a bunch of stuff about me, but I'm not going to tell you all those things. I'm going to leave that to mystery, and you can go look that up later, what those things are. But I do want to mention that I have a ton of stickers with me. So if you want testing library stickers like React Testing Library, DOM Testing Library, Cypress Testing Library, or if you want the testing trophy from testingjavascript.com, or chats with Kent for my podcast, I've got stickers for all those things. So come find me to get your stickers. Okay, I'd like to invite everybody to please stand, because these chairs are way too comfortable. And I almost fell asleep today in these wonderful chairs. So put your arms out in front. You don't have to if you don't want to. That's fine. But put your arms out in front of you, squat down like this, and come back up. Whoa. I almost lost my mic here. Okay, that's an air squat. We're going to do 12 of these together. And Dave has volunteered to... No, just kidding. All right, count out loud with me. Ready? 1, 2, louder. 3, awesome. 4, 5, 6, 7. You're doing so good. 8, 9, 10, 11, and one more, 12. Okay, stretch up as high as you can. And over to one side, and over to the other. Awesome. Okay, go ahead and sit down. Thank you so much. Your body needed that so bad. It is 2:45. So, okay, cool. So I like to start out with expectations. This talk is, I'm going to be talking about managing an open source project. And it's based on tips and tricks that I have learned having done this for, I think, about 5 years now. And I manage and maintain over 100 packages on NPM. Many of them are done or not really used anymore. But I've been doing open source in the JavaScript ecosystem for quite some time. This isn't a definitive guide or perfect for all scenarios, so take that for what it is. But I've got a lot of stuff to share with you, and some of this will be moving rather quickly. So buckle up. All right, so must-haves. What every project needs, you must have a license. If you don't have a license, then you are not open source. It's the definition of open source requires that you have a license. So review the licenses that are available. I really like MIT, but there are many other licenses that are available. Otherwise, your project is just code that you shared online, not open source. Have a code of conduct. If you want to make your community a friendly and safe one, I strongly recommend that you have a code of conduct. I actually haven't ever had to execute my code of conduct. There was one time that somebody said something that could be interpreted as offensive, and so I talked with them, and they apologized, and they made it right. But I'm pretty sure that the reason that I haven't had to really do much enforcement of a code of conduct is because I make my code of conduct very prevalent, and people know that if they're going to be involved in the community that I'm building, they have to treat each other kindly. So definitely, we want to live in a world where people can bring their uniqueness and their distinction and add it to our own Borg style. So, all right, so then let's define our project scope. Define what done means for your project. If you don't do this, then somebody comes to you with an issue and says, hey, that's a really cool thing that your project does. It'd be cool if it could also do this other thing that's totally unrelated. And if you don't define your project scope and say no sometimes, then you can wind up with a project that is just really not useful to anyone because it does too many things and very hard to maintain as well. So some things that can help, a roadmap, so you could put it in a markdown file. I've found that in most of my projects, they're small enough that having a whole separate file doesn't make sense, so putting it at the bottom of your README or something can be helpful. But this can help yourself think about it, and other people who come into your project also see what is in scope and out of scope for the project. And if they say, oh, I would like to do this, but it's in the won't do of their roadmap, then I'll just fork this and do it myself, or I'll make a new project. And that's totally cool. Your project doesn't have to do all the things for all the people. Extensibility is another thing that can help you with scoping your project. And so how many people here use Redux, have actually shipped a production app with Redux? Yeah, so a lot of you. Redux is pretty much done. For the last several years, there hasn't been a lot done within Redux, the core project itself. And the reason for that is because it's extensible through middleware. And so making a library that is extensible, inverts control so that the users have more control over the things that your library is capable of, can really help you scope down your project to specific things and enhance the capabilities of the project itself. And so I have a YouTube video where somebody asked me, how do you do this? And I answered them in this tech chat. So you can go watch that later if you'd like to dive into that deeper. OK, so automation. I would definitely not be able to maintain the number of packages that I do if I didn't use automation to help a lot. And at the time that I started automating things, it seemed like it was a waste of time because I was automating tasks that literally take 10 seconds, like npm publish and that kind of thing. But over time, I found that saving time isn't the only reason to automate workflows. And let's talk about that a little bit. So first off, simplify your setup. If you want to build a community of contributors, then making setup as simple as possible and work on all machines is really crucial. And one thing that I recommend is that you tell people, before you start contributing to the project, make sure that you get things set up on your machine. And this setup script that I have in all my projects is going to install all the dependencies, run the tests, run the build, run the linting, all of the things. And if that step breaks, then that's great, because there have been times when I have contributed to projects and I make my changes and then I run all of the build and test or whatever before I push it up and it's broken, and I'm thinking, oh, I broke something, let me spend the next 2 hours of my life figuring out what I broke, only to find out that it was actually broken when I downloaded it in the first place. It wasn't my fault. And so having a setup step can really save you time, but also the people who are contributing to your project a ton of time as well. And here are a couple packages that I use a lot that are really helpful. This KCD scripts is kind of, it's my package, actually Crossing Envy is too. But KCD scripts is pretty specific to the way that I develop my packages. I would actually recommend that you learn what it does and fork it and make your own version of this that suits your needs. But having some automated that setup is a really, really useful thing. Has been really helpful for me. Automating code quality, so strongly advise ESLint, strongly disadvise using every ESLint plugin that you can find, because I think more than half of the ESLint plugins on NPM are actually bad. I think. So yeah, be careful about what ESLint plugins that you use or ESLint rules that you enable, but definitely use ESLint. It can just, it's so easy to just throw away a bunch of bugs. Like a whole category of bugs just goes away with ESLint, and it's so easy to set up. Prettier. If you're not using Prettier, you probably haven't heard of it, and if you've heard of it and you're still not using it, I just don't understand you. There's still people, and most of the time when I hear people, they're like, oh, I don't use Prettier because my architect said that we can't use Prettier, and that architect, I don't know who's paying that person. Okay, so yeah, Prettier big time. Automated tests and coverage, especially with libraries, it's pretty trivial to get 100% code coverage. So all of my packages that I'm actively maintaining have 100% code coverage, and it saves me a lot of time, because when somebody contributes a pull request, I have my tests running automatically, and I can see that they broke the test, and they can go fix it before I even look at the PR, which is really nice. And I feel confident pushing the changes that they've made because my tests are passing. Now, that does come with the stipulation that you're writing tests that are actually useful, and if you want to learn how to do that, then testingjavascript.com is the thing that you want to look into. Okay, so then Husky and lint staged are just two packages that really help in some of this stuff. I don't like the poop emoji, but this is lint staged. That's their mascot or something, so I had to put it. But those are two packages that are useful. Give those a look. automate releases. I can't tell you how much of my time I've saved automating releases. And there are packages that I don't really maintain anymore, I don't even have on my machine, that I'm still actively releasing, because all that I need to do, because I've set up this automation, is I review the PR on my phone, and I say, it looks good to me, or I comment whatever, we go back and forth a little bit, and then I merge it from my phone, and it's released automatically, like magic. It is so awesome. I strongly advise looking into automating your release process. Not only does it save you a lot of time, but it also makes your consumers of your package happier, because you don't get the question, okay, when is this going to be released? Because it always is. Like within minutes, it's out, and people are happy with that. So I strongly advise looking into automating releases, and semantic release is just fantastic for that. I've been using this for years. Okay, next talking point, community. So open source is super huge about people. You actually, I have spent way more time working with people and talking with people about open source than actually working on open source code as a maintainer and just as a project contributor. So here are a couple of things that can help you with that community aspect of managing an open source project without sacrificing your soul. So first off, documentation. I think that's pretty much a no-brainer, but most people, when they think about documentation, they pretty much only think about API docs, and they skip some of these really important steps. So I want to mention a couple things. In all of my READMEs, the first thing that people see after the title of the project and a rainbow of badges is the problem statement. What problem does this project solve? And the nice thing about having the problem statement followed by the solution is that this is how you can make sure people don't waste their time by investigating your library. They can say, oh, this problem is the exact problem that I'm looking to solve, so therefore I will use this library. If you don't give this problem statement, then people might try it and they might get lucky, or they might just be a little bit lazy and file an issue and state their problem in 30 pages of prose for you to read, and then you're supposed to tell them whether your library can solve that problem. I wouldn't be saying that if it didn't happen to me. I did not read it. So explain the problem so people can relate to that. Explain the solution so people can decide whether they like the way that you're solving the problem. And then you can get into things like installation, how to get the project installed. Remember that yours may be the first project that somebody ever learned or ever decides to start using in the NPM ecosystem, for example. And so if that's the case, saying installation, npm install x, that type of person might not have any idea what that means. It's in a code block, and they're like, so do I write that in my editor? What do I do with that? So yeah, be a little bit welcoming to newcomers in the way that you document how you install things. Just say this project is distributed on NPM, which is packaged with Node, and NPM is a link to the NPM website, and Node is a link to the Node website as well. And you save a lot of people a lot of time. And then you have your API documentation, of course. And then I strongly advise examples, and your examples come from when you answer people's questions or when other people answer each other's questions. Somebody asks a question, how do I use this with this other package? And you say, okay, well, let me make an example, either a repo or a code sandbox or whatever it is. And you give them a link to that, and then you put that same link in your examples documentation, and now you'll never get that question again because you've got an example. Or if you do, you just really quickly say, hey, I've got an example for that. So yeah, there was one project that I had a while ago. I don't really maintain it anymore. It's called Angular Formally. And the website was basically just a crazy amount of examples, like over 100 examples of all the times I answered people's questions about how to use the library. And with every example that I added, I got fewer and fewer questions, even though the use of the library was increasing. And I would suggest that the use of the library increases because the documentation and the examples were increasing as well. People like to use libraries that have good examples. Having tutorials is useful, and blog posts and screencasts and talks, all of these things to kind of help people become aware of your project and find ways that they can integrate those into whatever tech stack that they're using. all good ideas for your documentation. Then we have community sites. So I strongly advise a chat, a place for people to talk. If you just rely on GitHub issues for a project that is growing in its community, then your email inbox would just never be empty. And maybe you're okay with that. But having a separate place where people can discuss and help each other with things can really simplify your life as a maintainer so that you're not just answering people's questions all the time. The community often is really welcoming and interested in helping each other. It's amazing, actually. I still don't understand why they do it, but they're super nice for doing it. Stack Overflow is pretty good, especially if your project attracts a lot of people who are new in the industry. I've had a couple projects where people would file an issue, and basically their question was, how do I JavaScript? And I mean, I'm happy to help people learn how to JavaScript. It's kind of my job, but I don't have the bandwidth to answer everybody's question, so sending them over to something like Stack Overflow can be helpful there as well. And so I have like tags on Stack Overflow for my projects so that people can tag their questions with my library, and occasionally I will go over there and look at what people are asking about. Issues and pull requests, of course, just don't turn those things off. They're useful. And then something that I did, and I've done with some projects here in the past, is memorable short URLs. It's really super helpful, and I've actually got a video on YouTube that shows you how to make a URL shortener totally for free, and it takes 5 minutes, and it's amazing, and I love Netlify so much. Yeah, so for your library's domain, if you get a domain name, I advise having some quick short URLs that can take people to places where they can get things like help and file issues and all these things. The reason that having memorable short URLs is useful is because all the people on your community are asking questions and things. They start sharing these short URLs with each other. And it saves you a lot of time when you say, hey, if you need help, go to this URL, because you don't have to go look up what that Code Sandbox URL is or whatever. But it also encourages other people to start sharing those things as well. So that has been a real big help for the projects that I've had. So a couple of things on issues. I strongly advise the use of labels that GitHub has. Like, you can just make all kinds of labels that have funny emoji and stuff. But having labels helps to organize your issues, especially if you're getting many. It gives new contributors a place to look if they decide that they want to start contributing to the project. And on that same vein of contributing, having a contributing MD file, GitHub gives that file special treatment in their UI. And so when they see that file, when GitHub sees that file and somebody's filing a new issue, there will be a little link to that contributing. So here you can explain, here are the types of issues that we want you to be submitting, or if you need support, don't file an issue, instead go to the chat or whatever you want in there. And also, it's really helpful on the pull request side, which we'll talk about in a second. Issue template is, well, it's not new anymore. I guess it's been a little while, but it is a fantastic file that you can create in your project, and GitHub will preload your any new issue that somebody creates with whatever you have in this file, and that's a really great place where you can say, hey, if you're filing an issue, I need to know what version you're using and what version of this other library you're using that works together, or what's the sample code? Give me a small example. Here's a place where you can go make a reproducible example, that kind of thing. So yeah, issue templates are awesome. And saved replies can save you a lot of time if somebody files an issue because they ignored the issue template or something, which does happen occasionally. And the nice thing about saved replies is that you can spend like 15 minutes typing out the most kind, thoughtful, wonderful saved reply that basically just tells somebody that they did something wrong, and then you spend like 2 seconds sending that saved reply to somebody, where the alternative would be somebody files something, they're saying something they're not supposed to, whatever, and you don't have time to spend 15 minutes on this, so you just really quick, no, you filed this in the wrong place, close the issue, and then walk away. And that person feels like a failure at open source because it was their first ever issue. So yeah, saved replies can help you be a little bit more empathetic. And then I strongly advise also to get out of the way. So especially when I was early in my open source days, I was so excited that people were using my software that as soon as I would get an issue, my phone would buzz, and I would jump on GitHub really quick, and I'd answer their question, and I'd make an example, or I'd make a new pull request to fix the problem, or whatever it was, as quickly as possible. And people always really appreciated that, so it just like fed into itself. Like my ego would grow, and then I'd just keep on doing it more. And eventually my relationships start suffering, and nobody's really happy there, except for the people who are benefiting from my free labor, I guess. But what I found is if I just waited for an hour, then maybe they would answer their question themselves, or somebody else who was watching the repo would answer the question instead. And if you're wanting to build a community around this project and make it so that you can maybe one day move to a different project or just stop maintaining the project, then you need to get out of the way and let other people contribute as well. So yeah, that is what I have to say about that. On the pull request side of things, it's pretty much all the same. So yeah, same stuff. Except one thing I want to mention about the contributing guidelines can talk about how to set up the project. That's where you can say, npm install or npm run setup or whatever it is to help people get off on the right foot when they start contributing. There is a pull request template where I have check boxes on did you do this, did you do that, which is really helpful because people, oh, I didn't do that. Let me go do that before I even open the pull request, so I don't have to ask them those things. And then get out of the way here too. So lots of the time, I don't even merge the pull request to the projects that I'm maintaining. I invite other contributors, and I ask them to, I'll review the pull request, and I'll say, it looks good to me. I'd like to have somebody else review this and merge it. And that just, when somebody else starts pressing the green button, like that green button, it feels great to click on merge. But when somebody else starts doing that, they get that feeling, and they start feeling more invested in the project. Another thing that I have here is makeapullrequest.com, which is just like a silly HTML website that just links over to an Egghead course that I made a couple of years ago. That's totally free and teaches people how to make a pull request on GitHub. So enable other people to make pull requests to your project. When somebody files an issue with a bug, instead of saying, OK, yeah, I'll get that done in a minute, why don't you say, hey, how about you fix that yourself? And you enable them by showing, if they say, oh, I've never done this before, you can give them resources to help them learn how to do that. OK, cool. So getting contributors. You really can't do this on your own. If you think that you can, feel free. But in my experience, burnout is real, and your family relationships can suffer. So be careful of that. So be aware of your contributor pipeline. Michael Rogers, who was, I can't remember what his title was, but he was working in the Node project around community or something, and he wrote this blog post called Healthy Open Source that I recommend you go give a look at. It's a great blog post where he talks about the contributor pipeline, and I'll show you a little bit more about that here in a second. But one thing that they do in the Node project is that they give commit access to the Node project freely and early. So if you make a non-trivial change to the Node project, you get commit access to the project. And when I heard that, I was like, what? That's crazy. What if they commit some bad code or something? It's yeah, what if they commit bad code? We've got Git these days, and Git is pretty good at fixing bad commits. And if somebody's a bad actor, then we can get rid of them, and it's not that big of a problem. So giving commit access freely and early will encourage people to contribute more because they feel invested in the project. So what you're doing as you're building the contributor pool is you're helping, or you're doing things that will help people feel more committed to the project itself. So in that blog post that Michael wrote, he has this graphic where all the white space is not labeled, but that's all the people in the world. And then outside of that, you have all of your users, and those users can become contributors. Contributors can become committers, and then committers can get on the TC. That's the technical committee, the people responsible for making releases or making a decision on which direction to go architecturally or whatever. So if you forget about your pipeline, then you start doing things that aren't helpful for users or helpful for users to become contributors. So don't forget about the pipeline. Make it as easy as possible to get started using the project. and to get started contributing to the project. Lower the barriers even for people who have never contributed to open source before. And you'll find that more people contribute to your project and are committed and invested in your project. So again, encourage contribution. Don't do everything yourself. It does take longer to have other people do things, especially if they're brand new to open source. But you'll find that they learn, like lots of these people pick it up quickly. And so when you let them do it, then they learn quick and they'll start doing more things for you. And it's easier to do, to maintain a project with many people than to just maintain it yourself. And their distinctiveness and their background can also help inform the decisions that you make as you're maintaining your project. So don't do everything yourself. Here's an example of a couple years ago. Somebody emailed me and said, hey, I noticed this problem on this website, and I just wanted to let you know. And I said, that's great. Thanks for letting me know. Here, I know it's too small. Sorry. Would you like to fix it yourself? The code is here, and follow the contributing guidelines and all of that, especially these bits. And then this person was like, oh, yeah, I just totally forgot that this is open source, and we could do that. So 1 minute. So long story short, he did, and it was his first ever pull request, and it was awesome. So I've invited a lot of people, new people, into the open source world this way, and it's been really rewarding. It would have been easier for me to do it myself, but spending an extra couple minutes getting people to contribute has been a rewarding experience. Now, because I don't have a whole lot of time, I'm just going to go through, speed through to the review, which basically has all this stuff. And yeah, and then we'll wrap things up. So you have to have a license. You're not open source if you don't. Have a code of conduct. Define your project scope. Automate stuff. Make your, so when I automate stuff, it's like I'm cloning myself, and now instead of one Kent who's manually checking that everything's running okay, there's 1,000 Kents who are checking each part, because I have 1,000 unit tests, for example. So community, don't underestimate it. It takes a ton of time, but you can do things to lighten the load, and as the community grows, it just kind of maintains itself. Don't forget about your contributing pipeline. We didn't talk about rolling out the red carpet for newcomers, but that makes it easier for everybody, so think about that. Recognize new contributors. I didn't really talk about this, but I'll just mention, go check out allcontributors.org. Awesome projects to help people be more invested in your project, and don't let your project die with you. So document how you maintain the project. And here are a couple of resources you can find on my slides. Go check them out when you feel the need to do so. And here's a link to my slides. Thanks, everyone.